Mine's working.
Is it on now? Yeah.
It's not on the screen, or so are we live?
Yeah, good afternoon, one and all. I'd like to wish everyone a Happy New Year. Thanks for being on time. I'd like to get the formal part of the meeting going here. I'm kind of new to this the structure and chairing a meeting like this, so bear with me. Going to do my best to get through this and get comfortable with the process here. So, anyway, I'd like to start by call the meeting to order. And are there any issues with the agenda? Comments?
Declarations of conflict of interest.
Pardon me?
Second item is declarations of conflict of interest.
Yes, yeah, and item 2, are there any declarations of conflicts of interest? None? Okay, we're good. All right, thank you. And third item, approval of our agenda as presented. Is there any issue or approval with our? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the mover and the seconder, Bob or Councillor Drong, thank you, and Councillor McCabe for moving that. So I guess yeah, getting into a little more here. Fourth item, review terms of reference and confirm recurring monthly meeting time. The terms of reference for the finance audit, tendering and administration has been circulated. All members have had a chance to view it. Just wonder at this time, are there any comments, questions, clarifications required for the terms of reference for this committee?
Thank you.
Councillor McCabe?
I think there's, it's for me, I mean, this is just my own thoughts and opinions, is that there's still a lot of unclarity, and there's one that I would like us to be able to go back and look at. I'm looking where we talk about the procurement. Where is this? Procurement. To advise and recommend on the procurement policy and procedures to ensure all procurement is followed fairly. But I'm not seeing that we're even responsible for the procurement bylaw under this committee. Where does procurement come under, Your Worship?
We don't have a procurement bylaw.
Okay, well,
Yes.
I think that would be something that we
No,
might want to develop, would be a recommendation.
That was brought up at strategic priorities in
Okay.
intergovernmental cooperation.
Okay.
That the next steps will be and it's required by the Municipal Government Act to create a procurement bylaw. We've been using a policy for the last 4, 8, 12 years. Requires a bylaw. So strategic priorities has taken that on. Again, working outside of the silos.
Yeah, it's important if it's going to fall under our terms of reference here at this committee that there's input and thoughts from staff and as well, I believe, because I think that's important. I know we had a lot of issues around giving out tenders and stuff for, we had lots of discussion around whether we could look at maybe some extra points or some ways to support local a little bit better. So I think that's a really important point that we have to remind when we're looking at this bylaw for procurement, is how we can best support our local economy when we are awarding tenders and purchases. The other thing I'm confused with, again, and I understand the money piece on the parking, but parking to me is in about 3 different committee levels, and I think that needs to also be taken and put somewhere where one person manages it, maybe with advice, without being silos-based, and input from this committee, but I don't think it's a responsibility of our committee, so I don't know why that one's there. And the freedom of information and privacy, what does that have to do with finance?
What does it have to do with finance? Well, let me address the first issue on parking. Parking is a revenue generator for the city. So if we look at developing the budget for 2023, 2024, we have to project what that amount will be. Plus, if police or economic development recommend an increase, it has to go through this committee before it goes on to council. So it's a revenue item in the revenue and expenditure of a budget. And what was the other point you raised there, Councillor McKay?
And I see that point, Your Worship, for having to have input into that. I just don't know why it's, anyway, I mean, maybe it has to be more clearly stated with collaboration from the other departments or something when you're looking at terms of reference. Because people will pick this up and take these as, this is their stuff. The FOIP, Freedom of Information and Protection, Privacy.
So, our manager of finance, I know when it comes to FOIP, and it does, there will be issues that deal with financial matters, and that may have to be cross-referenced by this department. Is that correct or incorrect? Maybe both of you can answer.
That is correct. However, it is under administration, and
Thank
that
you.
is part of this committee.
So we took over administration. Previous to this, it was finance, audit, tendering, and properties. Remember, HR was human resources, communication, and administration. Administration now falls under this committee because it's also a better fit. Correct, Nancy?
That's correct. Typically, you would have, if we had a director of corporate services, it would include finance, audit, tendering, IT, and administration. So this is a reasonable change.
Thank you.
And on the procurement bylaw, Nancy, I believe you were on finance, and I think you were on finance too, Councillor Duran, when we brought in the province. It was Lori Richards. Were you on finance? She talked about the procurement act with the province, and in that act, it does state points for local content. If the price is, let's say, the tender price is within 10% of the lowest bid, and it's a provincial company, that points could be awarded to that. So we definitely have to look at the Provincial Procurement Act to get some guidance and to make sure that we're trying to keep them symmetrical or close to it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just to kind of loop back or stay with the procurement piece here, just kind of so I'm kind of clear, I guess. So we're in the midst of updating a procurement policy that's going to have some, no.
Mr. Chair, we're starting from ground zero. But the MGA, the Municipal Government Act, was passed by the previous council, and here we are 4 years later. We didn't do anything with it. So we have to, that has to be an effort this year to get this procurement bylaw in place.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just
Yeah.
a follow-up to that. There is a draft policy. I did that a couple of years ago, but it is still in draft form. And we are adding other components to it now, for example, sustainable procurement, and that will, you'll be receiving more information on that in the coming months. So the base is there. It just needs further clarification in some areas, and I expect it will be put towards council in the coming months.
Is there, Your Worship, is there a timeline that we can try to think about around this?
Yeah, the timeline is as soon as possible, ASAP.
Also, further to that, as part of our strat plan, that will be one of the action items in the strat plan, and the action items will be assigned a date and also a person to whom is responsible.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Staying with the terms of reference, is there anything else that anybody see in there? Councillor Drown?
Yeah, thank you, Chair McAleer. I guess I had the same idea or thought to make recommendations for rates for water and sewer. Does that mean that water and sewer would get the recommendation through the committee and then come here for final approval? Is that where we're going with that one?
Yes, so typically, things like that will always go to the committee first, and then there'll be a recommendation made or not to move it towards the Finance Committee. And then the Finance Committee will do the same in making a recommendation to move forward or not to council.
Okay. And the other question I have is, to develop and implement corporate key performance indicators, what does that mean?
Well, these are kind of benchmarks, per se, for the organization, and you could have them in various categories. It could be, resident satisfaction. You could have, financial key indicators as to what we would like our surplus to be. It's a endless stream of just what you feel is important in your organization and how you can measure that.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Mr. Chair, could I just go back to what Councillor Duran said, to make recommendations for rates for water and sewer rates? I think that sewer name is going to the wayside. Wastewater is more appropriate these days. I don't know if that's the same for Betty in Ontario, but sewer is an old adage, an old word. So could I ask if we change that to wastewater? And on sustainability, I know, Mr. Chair, at the Strategic Priorities Committee last week, we talked about including in all the terms of references for all the standing committees for the city to meet net zero 2040 emissions. I think that's something we have to incorporate as anything that we're doing for budgeting in terms of finding revenue to enhance our sustainability towards that goal of net zero 24 emissions. And we're trying to get that into all the standing committees. And Councillor Duran, I'll be proposing that when we meet it as a water and wastewater committee, that it would be part of that mission statement. Not a mission statement, but a goal.
And when was that for, 2040?
2040. It follows the province's target, and that's what we're trying to meet. And I think all the municipalities on Prince Edward Island are trying to meet that 2040 target.
Thank you.
Just if I could, maybe to just ask the question, as talking here about make recommendations for water and sewer services. As I think about that, water and sewer is its own corporation, its own utilities, so wouldn't they, on the rate thing?
Water and sewer is a separate legal entity, you're correct. However, when we do our consolidated statements for the city of Charlottetown, water and sewer is included.
Right. Okay. But wouldn't they be the drivers on what the rate structure should look like?
Absolutely. And again, their recommendations would go to the water and sewer, or water and wastewater committee, and then be forwarded to council or to finance. So we are, they're the experts in their own
we're taking their
field. So it's their recommendation that we would rely on.
Great, thanks for the clarification. Are we okay on the terms of reference? Is there any further discussion, questions, clarifications on terms of reference?
Mr. Chair, would you like to have a friendly amendment done on the terms of reference to make it clear that you're accepting recommendations from the utility on the rates, and then it's more clear?
Yeah, that would make more clarity to me. For perhaps to have that clarity would be great. Thank you.
I just have one further question too, Chair. One other point, when we said we liaison with the Board of Directors for Kerry and the Charlottetown Civic Center management, I know that past practice has been. I don't know how often, and maybe someone could clarify that. I don't think it was stipulated, but I think we should be more clear with setting at least, once or twice a year, or how often you feel that it's necessary, and that information gets shared back, because we've gotten into some discussions there too where it just wasn't happening. And I think if that's part of our mandate, we should indicate how often those meetings should happen and ensure that they follow the regulation.
So are you asking to invite them in?
No, I'm just saying that, or I guess I'm asking the question, do we have regular meetings with these two boards for updates? I know that they pass in their paperwork and stuff, but is there regular discussion?
No, not unless it concerns their grants, the capital budget. That's as far as the manager of finance position goes. However, Wayne, our economic development interim manager, sits on the board of Bell, and I'm not sure what the association is with Eastlink.
He sits on the board too. Wayne sits on Eastlink. So both boards, Bell Alliant and Eastlink, we're the majority shareholder. So liaise, I think it would be a good idea to once or twice a year, bring them in to ask what's going on, because I think that's a good door to keep open, Mr. Chair.
All right. Can we have the, I guess, maybe the minutes reflect that, or the comments on that?
Just for clarification, Mr. Chair, are you looking for a specific number, or do you want to just say to have meetings as required, regular meetings, meetings biannually? What's your preferred language there?
I think an update of biannually would be good, just to come in and make sure that everybody's doing well, and that we're not, just to be kept in the loop to see where the books are and where everything is.
According to the partner agreements now, Councillor, there is a regular reporting that happens that goes to finance with monthly financial statements, and the GM's report and other reports that go to the board also come into the city on a monthly basis. So there is that reporting already in place, but the only time that any representatives have actually come here in person is to present their financial asks at budget time, which is once a year, of course.
Thank you, but I think what I know, if I can recall, and Councillor Duran and his worship might be able to clarify if I was right, but I know we had some discussion where nobody was really sure who was responsible to meet with these boards, who was taking accountability for these boards, what was happening. So there was a lot of confusion in the council chamber at that time, and I think it never hurts to have opportunity to hear information where twice a year.
So getting back to my original question then, are you looking for possibly biannually? Okay, thank you.
I think that would be good. Are you good?
Thank you, Councillor Cape.
Just because, we want to get ahead of things, especially starting off new. We don't want to be behind the eight ball when, if there's extra monies needed for these two places. We'd like to see where your vision is, where it's going, what you're going to need. It seems to be rushed all the time. So agreeing with Councillor McCabe there, twice a year we'd see a vision that maybe some expenses are coming, and we'd like to get ahead of that instead of council just having to meet and discussing those things. That's my thought process. Thank you.
And just on that, are we kind of talking about we wouldn't be having a separate or special meeting for this? That they'd be part of an agenda of a regular council meeting, or?
Mr. Chair, there's already one meeting set up. They come in budget time. That's one. Councillor McCabe is saying biannual, so the next meeting would be 6 months later.
Okay. Is the committee good with that?
Yeah, that's great.
All right.
And that's CADC, Bell Alliant, and Civic Center, and I know we have representation on other boards, but we're not the majority shareholders, so leave it just at that. Good?
Okay. Again, not closing it off, but are we good on terms of reference? Okay. thank you. Good points raised. Item 5, update on the budget process. Nancy, our finance manager?
Just before we move on, we should we should confirm the time for the recurring monthly meetings for finance and audit.
Yes.
They've typically been they have typically been the Wednesday prior to council
Right.
at 12 noon.
Well, that's a good idea. No?
It is for people that could have opportunity to join at noon and people that don't work, but I am.
No, I'm retired.
Or are retired. I am available. I do have a lunch hour. I have a different position for a few months, so I have approximately an hour. I'd like to start at 11. Propose we start at 11:30, and I have about an hour. So I know it's going to be busy during budget time, but if it's going to be a meeting of 2 and 3 hours, lunchtime meetings won't work for me. If we can keep it to normal time, I can do 11:30 would be my preference.
Mr. Chair, look, if I'm sure Councillor Duran has no issue. If you have to make it at 3:30, I prefer 3:30. Is it all right for you, Councillor Duran, or?
Yeah,
Like, it's good for me.
I'm flexible as well, so
Yeah, we're trying to work with you, Councillor.
can we go with that? And then if there's an issue, we can look at
Sure,
changing.
you are going to have more meetings during budget time, so you might want to look at lunch times during that budget time when you're meeting very often, only because you might, for me, after an hour with all these numbers, I'm not really paying attention anyway. So I think if you can do them and do them well,
So I think what I'm hearing is we'll, the first Wednesday before the regular monthly council meeting, and we talking 11:30 or 12? 11:30? And we're typically, I guess, understand, are we typically an hour or an hour and a bit potentially? And,
Go longer there, Mr. Chair. Depends on how many items are on the agenda.
yep,
That's why I was suggesting 3:30 for these scheduled meetings, and then for any meeting in between, we can do the noon hour at 11:30. That's what I'm suggesting, especially around budget time. Is that all right, Councillor Duran?
okay,
3:30,
3:30,
yeah.
okay. Everybody clear? So we're talking the first Wednesday monthly before the
Regular month.
regular monthly council meeting at 3:30. And then, right, the other meetings could be at noon. Okay, great.
So just to be clear, Mr. Chair, it's the Wednesday preceding the monthly council meeting. So it's not the
Right.
first Wednesday of the month.
Right.
It's the Wednesday preceding.
That's what I thought I said, but I guess I
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah, so the next meeting would be February 8th at
Okay.
3:30, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, update on the budget process. Nancy?
So before we start that, as many of you are aware, I am the interim manager of finance and been in this position about a year and a half. It's time the position has been posted for stability and a permanence in the department. I have opted not to apply for the position. However, I would like to introduce you to Betty French. She will be the new manager of finance. She has just started with us on January 3rd, and I'll just let her take a couple minutes and introduce herself.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to meet you. And as of yesterday, I'm now a resident of Charlottetown. We bought a condo up in East Royalty and are quite excited to be moving here. I've been living in London, Ontario for quite a number of years and have spent 9 years working in the Treasury Department of St. Thomas, Ontario, which is about half an hour south of London and a very similar size to St. Thomas. My family are still there, but will be joining me in the next month or two. But I have 2 daughters here in Charlottetown. One has been here for several years, and one just moved here just in time for Fiona. Trial by fire. Yeah, they left Edmonton because the winters were too cold, and they came here and they've experienced the exciting weather here. So it's been a whirlwind 2 days, and I think it will continue to be a whirlwind until both budgets are passed. But I'm excited for the challenges and look forward to working with you all.
Well, thank you for that, Betty. Welcome to the city, and nice to have you here. Just having the family connection, I'm sure it means a lot, and wish you well in your new role.
So I'll carry on with the budget update.
Okay, thank you.
So we're specifically going to talk about the capital budget today. So the budgeting process has started. We have received, the finance department has received draft 1 from the departments, but these have not yet been to their committees. So these were more or less to give us in finance a ballpark number as to what we would be dealing with, which I wouldn't be prepared to release today. The committee meetings generally where the capital budget will be presented are closer to the end of the month. So we're looking like protective services and public works and so on are all around the 23rd, 24th, 25th of the month. So they will be presenting their draft 1 budgets there. So what will happen after that is once finance receives the budgets back from the managers once having met with their committees, we will compile that, and then we will be bringing it will be draft 1 being brought to the finance committee for discussion. So when we talk about our meeting schedule, I would caution you to be aware that last year we had 7 drafts of the capital budget that came to the Finance Committee. And I believe there were 2 council meetings on the capital budget. So we want to wrap that up as quickly as possible so we can get the manager solely focused on the operating budget. So I would expect to release a schedule, Betty, to release a schedule in the coming week or so, and it will entail probably at least 1 finance meeting a week, maybe 2, because we are, like I say, we want to get this wrapped up. There will be public consultation and a request for public feedback, which there will be a press release going out in the coming day or 2. And this will allow us to receive comments from our residents on what they would like to see and concerns they may have. So that is typically open 3 to 4 weeks. So, yeah, we're just kind of moving along with it, and I'm here until January 31st, so I will be, obviously, Betty and I have lots to talk about, and we'll be bringing the draft 1 to you probably the first week of February. And then it will be kind of a marathon to get, that approval.
Just to confirm, Nancy, did you just say that you'll be with Betty through this period as well? Is that?
I will be with Betty for as long as she needs me to be.
Okay.
It's a big job, it's a big process, depending
Oh,
on her
exactly.
comfort level. So my last day of work is to be January 31st, but I have told Donna, our CAO, that I would be available to assist Betty for whatever she may need.
Beyond that date, possibly? Is that,
That's
to
correct.
be clear? Okay.
Yes.
Just haven't been part of it myself as a resident, but the public piece, what typically has been the engagement in that in the past? Is there much engagement from the public on the budget process?
I think that would depend year over year, depending on what is happening in the city and what residents feel we require. So I think last year there was probably less than 20 comments. And these are not just individuals, these are organizations also. Like we might hear from Discover Charlottetown and so on about what they would like to see in our capital budget.
And I'm assuming these come in the form of emails, letters?
Both.
What's that?
Is it usually an open house that we have too, or is that just for the operational?
I've only been here, last year was my first year. However, I can say that with COVID in the last couple of years, it's, obviously we didn't have an open house. And again, we can, that'll be a discussion we can have with our CAO when she returns.
I don't think the uptake was huge, from what I recall. There would be some around, but I don't know if we need to bring all the management in for that. But that's just my thoughts.
Nancy, in 218, 219, I think Councillor Drawn, you were on finance then, I know that. And we did have the open house. Do you remember that?
You refer to finance, I only attended 2 meetings, right? So during that time, I wasn't.
So we did have an open house where we had stations with the different managers and residents circulated. Other public engagement or public consultation took place down at the Rods Hotel, where the council sat at the front, similar to a public planning meeting. But I found that going to the different kiosks with the different managers, there was a lot more input. So when COVID hit on March 13th, 2020, Betty, everything stopped. So we did everything by email, and that's basically how it was, email. We didn't have any public presentations because of the COVID-19 restrictions. Now that that's been lifted, I think we can look at, especially for the capital budget, Mr. Chair, there's always a lot of enthusiasm for the capital budget because of capital projects.
Any further comments, questions to Nancy on update on the budget process?
Just to add to that supplemental with regards to the public piece, there is a press release scheduled to go out that the finance manager will review with you as chair after the meeting, because that will indicate that there is opportunity for public engagement in the capital piece, Mr. Chair, and giving people a timeline to the end of the month to respond with any submissions that they might have. So at least we'll have that capital consultation piece checked off.
Thank you. All right.
Mr. Chair, if I just could interrupt, but if we're looking at a public engagement, a public consultation, I think this first draft that's going out for the start of the process will only be to encourage residents to submit thoughts and ideas through email, but we will go out further, hopefully, with a public engagement component.
Right. Mr. Mayor, we typically don't release the drafts publicly.
No, not talking about the draft. It's just go to the different, as I said, how we did it in 218, 219. The managers were up here to do both operational and capital, and residents circulated to the different stations. And then that was, again, part of the process. Any follow-up could include or involve emails being sent to councillors or to the finance department.
Okay. All right. Moving on to item 6 on the agenda, donation approval. And Nancy, if you can
Sure.
take us up to speed on that, please.
So we get a lot of requests for donations from different organizations. Typically, they're all nonprofits and provide great service to the community. So this is just a request for a small donation from Queen Charlotte, and their students are planning a trip to Ottawa and Quebec City. They are looking for a $300 grant. So with the bigger grants, we put them in the budget, but we also set aside a certain portion of funds for these types of kind of ad hoc requests. So there is certainly $300 in that fund to authorize this if the committee so wishes.
Not,
I just have a point. I think it's great, but I also, when you talked about grant criteria and interoperational, I remember we had lots of discussion around this too, and I think it might fall under this, but I think we need to have criteria established for grants moving forward. Do we have that done?
We do not. There is a grant policy, however. In my opinion, we need, especially for not so much for these, I mean, this is kind of self-explanatory, but for the larger grants, I believe we should have request financial statements. I also believe we should be aware of other sources of funding that they are requesting and being granted. So I do believe there's definitely a need to improve our grant policy.
Yeah, and I can say the same thing as Councillor McCabe. You know, this is it's a good cause as well as there'd be hundreds of schools within the city, sports teams, once we give to one, it's hard to deny the other. There should be a pot or a certain line item that, I guess it comes in. As it comes in, it goes out, I guess. But just to approve something so quickly, I know this was dated in November. It just, where do we start and stop? And I guess if we have a policy that says, okay, we have $100 for the year in the pot, and the first ones get a certain percentage. I'm just worried. I did sit on finance once before that when this did come up, we were going to work on it at that time, but I guess we never finished it with all the other work. So I don't know what we want to do or where we want to go with this.
well, as finance chair, I would certainly be very much interested in pursuing the grant policy thing and giving it some structure. And, I agree. That was kind of one of my first questions is, where does, what typically has happened, and is this somewhat precedent setting, and where do you, so I think in this world and the way we operate, you have to have policy in place, and your policy is your Bible. And so I very much like the meeting or minutes to reflect that a takeaway from this is that be an agenda item for the committee to see that as for how we handle this pending request, do we let it go?
I move it. I moved it.
I will second the $300 donation.
So moved, and great, good discussion, and great takeaway. It's follows that procurement thing, right? Good.
Working on it forever.
And I'd like to think that these things aren't a big task to maybe get in place with a little bit of homework. Okay, we're finished with donation approval. Item 7, and again, Nancy, year-to-date financial review to be distributed at meeting.
So yes, this is in your package. And we had some technical problems this morning, so this just got printed. So it's quite hot off the press. So I'm not sure if I will be able to answer all of your questions. However, just so you know what this report is about, this is for year-end or year-to-date, November 30th. So, and it's just a snapshot in time. So obviously, things have changed. If we were to run this report today, things for the end of December, it would be quite different, just because of, various transactions that are yet to happen and haven't yet been posted and so on. So, but what I can say, for 8 out of our 12 months, we're at 75% of our revenue. And we are tracking only at about 73% of our expenses. So for the year to date. So that's not an unusual place to be, for sure. But like I say, again, this report can change at any time with a, $300,000 invoice or $500,000 invoice coming in. So it just gives an idea of where we were at November 30th based on our annual budget.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Just looking at our insurance increase, is there a reason why our insurance increased so significantly?
Yes, so the insurance rate went up significantly last year. However, that information wasn't available prior to the budget being passed. It wasn't. And the other thing that stands out to me right now is when we look at police or fire services. It looks like we're in a $2.5 million over budget already, but that's about the costs we have collected or accumulated so far for Fiona. And EMO, emergency services, falls under fire. So we will have revenue to offset that once we start receiving the funding from the province.
And that was a question I had in general, like the whole Fiona expense piece, cost piece, is that still kind of working its way through in terms of the bill and what the province might be entitled, or what the city may be entitled to under?
Yes, we have someone working on that specifically, and we have submitted claims, and we are just waiting for kind of a payment and or additional questions.
And what's what approximate number are we looking at that the Fiona?
So far, it's about 2.5 million.
No, Mr. Chair, can I just clarify? Yeah, what's
They
a,
both roll up into the EMO, so I couldn't speculate. I wouldn't comment. I would not comment.
yeah. Could I ask, Mr. Chair, so if I look at the city expenditures, Public Works, we budgeted 15.5 million, and year-to-date, we've expended 12.3 million, correct?
That's correct.
So that includes the Fiona bill?
No, the Fiona bill is under,
Yeah.
it rolls up under fire because it's in emergency services, and emergency services has typically been included in the fire budget as a separate area, but it's, and I think it's because our fire chief has always been the lead on emergency services, so it would make sense that it would be in their budget.
So I think it was reported by the CAO that the cost of cleanup from Hurricane Fiona was about 11 million. And that's not reflected here.
Well, two things on that. I can't speak to that number. I'm not familiar with the origin. And secondly, Fiona is ongoing. Like, we will be probably slowing things down more now and picking up again in the spring for additional cleanup. So it's not completely over as yet.
So, Mr. Chair, just a supplementary question. So, if that's the number, 11 million, so it's going up, I think under the Federal Disaster Administration Act, that's the disaster fund, the feds pay 90%, federal government, and the province pays 10%? Is that correct?
Sue, are you?
There's a couple of things at play here. One is the residential cleanup program. That's a parallel course to all of our own cleanup. So the residential cleanup program, we will get 100% of our money back. So it's a non-entity. The only thing we're trying to sort out right now is the 10% and the 5% taxes breakout. The province has just told us in the past week that they will ensure that we get the 10% tax right out of the gate, but we have to go into a holding pattern on the 5% and how we're getting that back from the federal level. So the residential cleanup program should not be impacting the budget whatsoever. Our own cleanup is still, the number is high. I can't say that it's 11 or 10 or whatever it is right now because we are still incurring expenses. But where we're at right now with respect to that is why we can't give you a hard, fast report on it, is we're still waiting for the insurance company to deny the parts that are not insurable, that we have to, in turn, make a federal claim towards. So once we assess what our own insurance is covering, we can then claim with them and claim the remaining amount with the disaster relief and get compensation from them for that remaining part.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm just trying to figure out that if we're on the hook, let's say 11 million and more to go, and we don't know when the federal funding or the GST, HST is coming in, then we have to borrow to pay these bills, correct? Because I know with Hurricane Juan, you were here in Hurricane Juan, we didn't get our money from the feds 2 or 3 years from that date. So we will have to incorporate a line of credit that as interest rates go up, we're going to pay more money. So that's going to affect our budget going forward. And so I'm just asking if, we got 3 months before the fiscal year end, we will have a good, concrete, solid idea of what it cost, Fiona, and how we're going to pay for it until we get our federal funding and
That's
provincial
right,
funding?
and we are funding this, and Sue and I have had a discussion about whether, because the provincial program, or the residential program, the province asked us to take that on. To me, it would be reasonable to ask that we are reimbursed for our interest payments for funding that program on their behalf. The other is the city property, so we're kind of on our own there.
All right. Any more questions around the Fiona piece? All right.
Mr. Chair, just one last question on this is the last one. Under water on page 2, Nancy, water and wastewater surplus. So we're in a deficit of, can you clarify that? Where it says minus 3,444,000? It's the funds available. I'm just trying to get a clarification on it. I think that's what's. It's the last
So
one.
from operations, we would have revenue of 9.1 million.
Yeah.
And expenses of 9.6. So it is, at this particular point in time, a deficit of 480,000.
Okay.
However, there, again, it's a timing thing, right? It is just a snapshot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions on the year-to-date financial review? Okay, thank you for that, Nancy. Item 8, tenders.
Right, this is a tender from the IT department, and it's to award video conferencing. There were two bids received. One was $15,900, one was $30,153. So the recommendation from the IT department is that the tender be awarded to Ivan's Audio Visual, who had the lowest bid.
My understanding of those numbers, 30,153 one and 15,900 the other?
Yes, you are. And I questioned that too, because we've seen this many times with IT, but it depends apparently on what the approach is that the organization submitting the tender follows. So it could be various pieces of IT. They'll just put it together differently, and that's why that there's such a variation in the price. However, we do have a representative from IT here who may be better able to answer that question.
Yep, great, thank you.
What was the question again, Chair?
No, the question, the big discrepancy in the tender, 30,000, let's call it, and 15,900. I'm just,
Okay, so I have reviewed both the bids. So it was just differently presented. Like, for instance, in one of the planning rooms, we mentioned that we already have a TV, but the bidder ignored that and they give us a quote for a TV. So, and the technology used is different, but one thing you might have a look at.
excuse me, just so I'm clear, so you're saying, like on the 30,000 bid, there's a TV in there that there's not in the other?
There are different, and they also included a quotation for computers, which we don't need. So there was just a.
So if you back that sort of stuff out, do the tenders start to equal a little more?
What? Yeah. Yeah. So it's just that the bidder didn't read the RFP properly. That's what I can say that. And for Ivan's Audio, they have been given the best technical score by the IT team. So they are not just the lowest bidder, but they have the best technical score. That's why we recommended that.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we can't change tenders, so if they kind of get their tender information mixed up, that's on them.
Okay, so that's,
So
yeah,
we
I'm
don't
thinking there's got to be
back
something
out
jumping
or
out
we
here.
don't try to adjust or equalize various tenders because the whole point is to keep it objective and.
Yeah, I get I get that. Yeah, just for clarity again, what is this technology piece? Like what's the service we're
So
going to be
as
having done?
Yeah, so as it is written in the report, we have 2 meeting rooms.
Okay.
So we are looking to put video conferencing via Teams and room cameras, room microphones,
Okay.
room audio.
Okay.
So
Excuse
everything.
me. Yeah.
So
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we accept this tender at this committee level, move it to council for approval.
I'll second that,
seconder.
Mr. Chair. And not only that, Mr. Chair, it's for 70 Kent Street. So that's for our planning department.
Okay.
And 10 Kirkwood Drive is the police station, correct? Yeah, so it's not for City Hall. It's for those facilities that are owned and operated by the city.
All right, great. No, I see that here now. Yeah. Sorry for that.
this was a budgeted item underneath the IT, so it's no new money or anything like that, right? Thank you.
Thank you for that. We're good on tenders. And then I guess under 8A, recommended for approval, video conferencing, planning, and police. Yeah, I put that on. Second, we just have to vote. Check it out. Okay.
Thank you. We did. Unanimous.
Mr. Chair, before we adjourn, could I just get a point of clarification on the consultative exercise that the Finance Committee wants to embark on right now? Because we do have a press release we planned on sending out tomorrow, asking people to input on capital. If we're also asking them to provide input on operational right now, we need to amend the release. And if we're also doing an actual in-person public engagement process, we probably should mention that in the press release as well. My only warning to you at this point in time is that to get into an in-person public engagement process right now for capital is really going to put the council up against it, because you usually get your capital approved prior to your operational. It's usually approved by the end of February. So if you're doing online and written submissions coming in, that's a little more manageable to try to do by the end of January. But to try to do a full-blown public engagement exercise in City Hall before the end of January might be a little more difficult to do logistically. So I just want to get clarification as to what your intent is, and whatever you want to have happen will make happen, but it's going to also change your schedule for rollout.
Mr. Chair, I think the problem this year is that we just brought in we have a new council of December 6th. It's probably going to be difficult to do it in person, but for future years, I think it started in December, start the planning in the new year, having a public engagement where residents can get involved with the process. But yeah, for this year, because of the new council, I think I don't know if you agree or disagree, but I think that it'll be quite difficult to manage it.
And I agree, and I think just keep it with input, whether we do an online survey like we've done, or an email, or however you've done it in the past. But I also think once we have our strategic plan in place and we have things, it'll be nice to be able to educate and explain and tie all our budgeting around our vision for where we want to go. So I don't think we should do it this year.
For the purposes of this exercise then, and the press release going out, do you want us to amend it to say people can input by the end of January to both capital and operational?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could
Thank
be their
you.
Christmas wish list, right?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, are we good on that? And we okay to move to adjournment? Or so moved? Bob, second it. Thank you.
Great job, John.